Howdy, howdy, Sea Devil here, and welcome to my next pass on heavy infantry with great weapon testing. Now, in this video, I'm going to look at the new and improved foot squires and how they fit in with the pantheon of great weapon infantry. I will, of course, look at our longbeards with great weapons again, and I'm also going to take a closer look at the white lines of trace and the great swords from Empire, because they got a buff or a reduction in cost, and of course the pound for pound best value great weapon infantry in the game, Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and see how they all stack up now that the foot squires have been improved twice in the last two patches in the last month, and the great swords have had a reduction in cost. So I did have a lot of testing for my Longbeards with Great Weapon testing video that I did on April 21st, 2018, and now it's June 21st, 2018. I did do a test with Foot Squires versus Longbeards with Great Weapons yesterday, before this patch released, before they got their cost reduced to 650, and that's the only change I could see. They didn't get anything else. They just had their cost reduced from 700 to 650, but in the patch before they had one more health per entity. So for those that are new to my channel, what I do is I go through and demonstrate how I do the testing so that it can be repeated if you should want to repeat the testing. And then I take the data that I get. I do 7 tests with each matchup and take that data and we go to a spreadsheet. So I'm going to go through that. Now, I get it, the details are not that important for some of you. I will do my best to summarize this data at the end of the video. For those of you who love to test, love to go through spreadsheets, love to look at the data, this video is for you, so buckle up and we'll get going. So the first matchup I'm going to look at is the Longbeards with great weapons at 750 versus the new and improved Foot Squires with great weapons at 650. So again, for anyone who's new to the channel, I don't change the formations, I just run the units into each other. My goal is to make the test as repeatable as possible. Now, I understand that formations do make a difference, and I have a video showing that difference in my formation testing. So we'll just get these guys going, and we'll start the this is just a demonstration of the testing I did, and you can see just on impact, you know, pretty even. The Foot Squires have killed slightly more than our Longbeards. They think that they're winning this combat, and you know, the Longbeards with great weapons kind of want to think they're winning. It's very close, and you know, through the test you'll actually see I did 2 sets of tests very recently, so we're going to go over that data, but you can see the Foot Squires are now definitely winning, and the Longbeards with great weapons are just think they're even, but they're going to start losing. They've got a sliver of health. These guys are going to get a chevron very, very soon, and that's going to just take it home. Generally, well, maybe they're not going to get it. I don't know. But you can see it's incredibly close, though, and there they go. So the Foot Squires have won that, and that's the end of that fight. So we'll end that battle, and we're going to go to the data, and I will go over how I take the data and how I evaluate the data. So this is going to look a little busy. The test we're looking at is down here. This is some of the old testing I did. I just put it together so it would be easy to read once we get going. So this is the original test I did on April 21st, 2018 with the Longbeards with great weapons against the Foot Squires with great weapons at 700. And what I do for my test is I take the start time of the battle, that's right where they impact each other, and then I look at the end time of the battle so I can get how long did the battle take. I measure, or I take down the finishing hit points of each unit, look at the DPS or damage per second of each unit, and then I do a ratio of their finishing hit points to their starting hit points multiplied by their starting gold value, and do a subtraction to find the gold differential. How much gold are we winning or losing in that combat event? And then I also look at a gold per minute, which can be useful, and of course the win-loss ratio. So on April 21st, our Longbeards with great weapons lost 5 out of 7 to the Foot Squires. So we know the Foot Squires we know the Foot Squires are weak But our Longbeards with great weapons are even weaker. So what happened on April 20th? So yesterday when I did the tests. Now this is with the Foot Squires. You can see instead of having 5940 health, they have 6210. So the win-loss ratio was actually the same. You know, they still, the Longbeard's great weapons still won 2 out of 7. But the big difference here is the Foot Squires ended with 18% of their health, and they started with more health. So they actually ended up taking a little bit more gold away from our Longbeards with great weapons, which is what you'd expect. About 30-ish more gold. Is that stat point of health worth 30 gold? Yeah, probably in and around there. A regular stat point, just a 1 melee attack or 1 melee defense, is worth in and around 15 gold. Ish, you know, more or less. So you can definitely see the improvement in the Foot Squires in this test. It's odd that they actually both did more damage, DPS, to each other in this fight. The Foot Squires did 32 as opposed to 30, and the Longbeards with great weapons did 28 as opposed to 27. I think that's mostly a function of the battle time went down from 188 seconds average to 180, so maybe their charge bonuses were in there a little bit more. But now, I did another set of testing today to look at the Foot Squires at 650. And this, you know, again, the Longbeards with great weapons still won 2 battles out of 2 out of 7. So that seems pretty consistent. But, you know, and the Foot Squires finished with 18% health again on average, and the Longbeards great weapons 11%. And the DPS, you know, around 28.1 and 31.9 for the Foot Squires. The big thing is, now the Foot Squires are worth only 650 as opposed to 700, it devalues our Longbeards with great weapons, saying that now they were worth about 687, then they added the health of the Foot Squires, they were worth about 658, and now they're worth about 613. So they're getting devalued really fast because the Foot Squires were improved and the greatswords with the Empire greatswords were improved, which is just devaluing our Longbeards with great weapons even more, and our Dwarf Warriors with great weapons and Miners with great weapons for that matter, but we're not going to go over that. So what I wanted to do is to take a look at the original test, which has the Foot Squires up against the Chaos Warriors. So, and then I'm going to get to the other tests with the Chaos Warriors with great weapons and the Empire greatswords, etc. So this was the original test that I really wanted to focus in on, was to look at the Chaos Warriors, just regular Chaos Warriors, because they have 100 armor and they do not have armor-piercing weapon strength. You know, this is exactly the unit. Foot Squires are designed to do good against this type of unit because, you know, the Foot Squires have armor-piercing, these guys don't have armor-piercing and lots of armor. So I just wanted to go and look at our original test and see what that value proposition was. So I'll just start that battle. We'll go over it very quick, and then we'll head on to, I think, the White Lions versus the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. And then the Great Swords versus the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. We're still trying to see if the Chaos Warriors with great weapons are still the pound-for-pound best on the block. So we'll get this fight going, and really, this, again, even though these Foot Squires come in at 650 and these guys are the Chaos Warriors, regular Chaos Warriors are 750, the Foot Squires should beat them. You know, this is the unit that great weapons, you know, armor piercing are meant to beat. But it just still doesn't seem to be the case, which would say to me Foot Squires are still probably not quite where they need to be. Really in the pantheon of the other units, and we'll go over that, and I'll show the difference between these two tests. But the Chaos Warriors are still beating the Foot Squires even with their 1 extra health, and fairly reasonably. We'll actually look at that. They beat them 7 out of 7 times in the last fight, so we will go and look at that data and see if the Foot Squires could take any of those fights. So I think that data is up here. Yes, it is. So here's the original test, Foot Squires versus Chaos Warriors, and they lost 7 out of 7 tests, 7 out of 7 fights, and that would have said they, instead of being worth 700, they're worth 632. Now in this fight that I did today, they actually won 2, which was interesting, which is a definite improvement. and they actually came in at a value of minus 3.9. So they moved up from their value of 632 to 646. You know, that's not 30 gold, that's, you know, only 14 gold, but you can see that difference that 1 health has made. And again, for anyone who hasn't heard the explanation, I mean, doesn't understand or hasn't really thought about how health works in this game, you know, it's important because your unit at 1 health does just as much damage as it does at full health. So every health point matters, because a 1 health foot squire does just as much damage as a 60 health foot squire. Doesn't matter. So that's why health is such an important stat in this game. So you can see they've definitely improved. I mean, I think the foot squires at 650 should be able to beat the Chaos Warriors at 750 5 out of 7 times, you know, more regularly, just because this is sort of the rock, scissor, paper mechanic. So this is telling me the foot squires are still not quite where they need to be, you know, but they're definitely improved, and I think they are a much more solid pick at 650 with 1 extra health than they were at 700. So we'll go down to see if I can start pulling up that next test. White lines. Okay, so the next test I wanted to do was the White Lions of Trace. Where is the High Elves? Okay, they're at 800. They're versus Chaos Warriors with great weapons at 850. Now we know the Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and our last test is a pound for pound, but I didn't really demonstrate how they stack up against some of the other units that are very near to their cost. So I thought I would do that in this video just for reference purposes, so I can have that test in the can, and we can always refer back to it. But White Lions of Trace are often referred to as trash. They're not. But why they feel trashy if you play High Elves is because they really fade in the 4th quarter. Meaning once they lose that martial prowess and they've lost 50% of their hit points, they feel weak, and that's the last thing you remember. You know, your White Lions kind of going out with a whimper instead of going out with a bang. Whereas, you know, some units that have really good stats, they just seem to pound all the way to the very end, and that's why they feel weak. And plus, in multiplayer, it is actually quite easy to take advantage of this focus fire effect, where instead of having to focus fire a high elf unit down to routing, you only have to focus fire it down until martial prowess is gone, so you can actually get your focus firing done twice as fast and be twice as effective. So even though they're not trash one-on-one, they're weak in multiplayer because they're actually weak to a very specifically and commonly used tactic in multiplayer, which is focus fire. So that's why they feel a little weaker than they are. But let's go take a look at them. How do they line up against Chaos Warriors with great weapons right now, June 21st, 2018? And we'll do that fight, and then I'm going to go look at the data just to show you guys. And these White Lions of Trace will beat up on our Longbeards with great weapons. You know, they're maybe I'll show that at the very end. So we'll just get that battle going. We have these White Lions, and they are going to go up against the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. So, you know, our pound for pound champs are doing pretty good, but these White Lions, 19 kills, 24, 23. So it's not as far apart as you might think. You know, the White Lions are worth less, and now they're starting to get beat down, right? These guys got a chevron, they've lost their martial prowess, and there we go. Once the White Lions start to lose, it's just like they're just poured down the drain. They become weak really fast. So let's go take a look at those stats and see what they actually come out to, out of curiosity's sake. So here's the White Lions versus the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. They fought 7 times. The White Lions only won once. So, you know, there was some pretty close fights in there, but they only won once. And this would say the White Lions would compared to the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Now, Chaos Warriors with great weapons are the pound for pound best. They could reasonably be nerfed now by maybe 1 health, 2 health, or something like that, and that would probably be a reasonable nerf. I think. Now this will go back to, okay, the White Lions lose to the Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and they should, because they cost less. But the other reason, this goes back to the reasoning that I've used to explain why I think Dowie Dwarf Infantry needs to be better tier for tier than their peers, and that's because that's all the Dowie have. Dwarfs don't have cavalry, they don't have monsters, they don't have magic, healing, faction-wide effects, martial prowess, all these things that like Wa, like all these things that other factions have, the Dowie don't have. So for that reason, Dowie Infantry, gold coin for gold coin, has to be better than their peers. And Chaos Infantry is sort of in the same boat. Now, it's not as bad, but Chaos doesn't have a lot of ranged. They have no ranged. I don't think they have ranged infantry at all. They have their Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, which are just skirmish cav, and they don't have very long range. They only have 1 artillery, though the Hell Cannon is a pretty good piece of artillery. So, and they don't actually have that much choice in terms of cavalry either. They do have decent monsters, and they have like Chaos Poison Warhounds and stuff like that, but Chaos Infantry does have to be good. And in the lore, Chaos Infantry are very good, and the Dowie Infantry are very good. So would I be bothered if Chaos Warriors with great weapons stayed sort of pound for pound the best infantry? Not really, because of the faction mechanics that are aside from the basic infantry mechanics, like the basic stat matchups. So this is kind of one of those things that, a faction like Empire, which has pretty much everything in their kit, or a faction like the Greenskins that have everything in their kit. They have monsters, they have skirmish cav, they have skirmishers, they have stock, they have a lot of things. Their armor piercing or their infantry can be slightly weaker because they have so much more choice. So, I could see the Chaos Warriors' great weapons being slightly nerfed, but I could see them staying at the same and just being the best pound for pound. Somebody has to be the best. It's not awful that they would be the best, but I think that the Dowie should be right up there. Our Longbeards with great weapons should be putting in a good show for their cost, and they definitely don't. They get absolutely murdered by Chaos Warriors with great weapons and other infantry, and they get beat by Foot Squires at 650. So the next bit is sort of the big one. So great swords, Empire great swords versus Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Who can the great swords at 50 reduced cost take that pound for pound title away from the Chaos Warriors great weapons? Well, let's go see. So Empire greatswords used to be pound for pound the best in the game for the longest time, and then they were nerfed and things have changed. But in the last bit of testing I did, I said they were still weak, but they weren't atrocious. Now that they've been reduced by 50 cost, let's see what that does. So let's go take a look and see what these greatswords can do against this Chaos Warriors, the great weapons. And I think this is a pretty big measure, because the flagellants got a buff too. This is a pretty big measure. These infantry are really important to Empire, and it's all your mid-tier infantry are really important to every faction. So let's get that fight going and take a look at how these greatswords are going to do against these Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Well, off the charge, the Chaos Warriors with great weapons are winning, the greatswords are losing. Pulling it back a little bit. Yeah, the greatswords are starting to get, I would say, beat pretty handily. These Chaos Warriors with great weapons are really showing their quality right here. Maybe they can pull it a little bit back. They got a chevron there. it's close-ish, but Chaos Warriors with great weapons won that one. So let's go and take a look at what the data actually shows us once we do 7 tests. So when we get down here and look at the data, the great swords won 3 out of 7. So the Chaos Warriors with great weapons at 850 are definitely still the pound for pound best value armor piercing infantry in the game. Although the great swords have made up a lot of ground. You know, they're showing being worth 843, but you know, coming in at 900 instead of 950, these great swords are going to see a lot more of them, and they're good infantry. They're just good. Now, I'm not looking at the Graveguard with great weapons. It's just hard to test because their stats are quite low, and an important part and a pervasive part of vampire count play is Invocation of Nehek and sort of, you know, Mortis Engine buffs and these buffs and those buffs. So they're actually quite hard to test because they really, vampire counts are sort of they're more dependent on other units in that faction than pretty much any other faction from what I can see. And so I didn't do any testing on them because they're kind of weird to test because they crumble and whatever. But they did get a buff by having their cost reduced as well. The vampire counts unit. So, but here it is. I mean, Chaos Warriors are great weapons, still pound for pound the best. You know, they beat the great swords at 900, so they're punching above their weight. They definitely show their quality against the White Lions of Trace. You know, they are just simply the best at 850. And if we look, you know, our great swords though are improved. At 900, you're going to see them. They're going to pull more value. They're just worth it. And with all the other buffs, I mean, the Empire Artillery is all pretty good, you know, right now, and they're at a good place, I think. And the Cav definitely in a good place. The handgunners are solid. You know, they even have crossbowmen. I don't know about the Flagellants. I mean, was the 2 health enough to bring them up? So you might want to bring them. You know, they're still going to tar pit. It's just their melee defense is so low. You know, they're just not going to tar pit for as long. But here's where, this Empire Spearmen with shields, and Swordsmen have always been a very good value. And now that they buffed the Halberdiers, you know, they've got charge defense against all, and they've got, you know, extra leadership at 68. You know, maybe... I saw a battle where they were using, actually weren't too bad. And they got some buffs to Karl Franz and got a little more armor and etc. But I think the big thing you're going to see is actually Volkmar the Grim with... what is it? The Warrior Priest. Is the Warrior Priest got that ability? Scroll of Power, balance. Yeah, 6% weapon damage in 40 meters. Constant. And his abilities. Shield of Faith now at 40 meters. I think that would used to be just on him. 22% damage resistance for 25 seconds. And not Soulfire. Hammer of Sigmar, 40 meters. 26. Whoa! Oh my god. There's how Hammer of Sigmar. Every 60 seconds for 25 seconds plus 26 melee attack. Soulfire. Yeah, just with those two and 6% weapon damage and fire damage. You can bring him on the field at 7-11. Bring him on a mount. In a Barded Warhorse. Yeah. Holy. Yeah, that could be dangerous. You put your Warrior Priest with Volkmar the Grim because he has those same abilities. The Shield of Faith and the Grand Hammer, and those will stack. 26 melee attack, so that's 52 melee attack. Whew. And this lasts for 50 seconds. Oh my god. That's gonna be... You just bring these two yahoos with a bunch of great swords. You know, even low tier infantry. You bring them some swordsmen, some great swords. boy, that'll be crazy. But anyways, I need to summarize. So greatswords, definitely better. Obviously, I mean, that's just a straight up buff going from 950 to 900, and you're going to see them a lot more. I think that's the infantry buffs that they've gave to the flagellants. I don't know if that's enough, but the halberdiers, but definitely to the greatswords, are going to make Empire a lot better with all the other buffs they've had in recent patches. You know, Chaos Warriors with great weapons, still pound for pound the best. There's just no doubt about it. We've got our High Elves and our White Lines of Trace. Stat for stat, they're not as bad as you think, but they get real weak when you get into multiplayer because, you know, the natural thing to do, you can just do it twice as fast, which is focus fire them down to 50% health instead of routing, and they really fade hard in the fourth quarter, but they're better than Longbeards with great weapons. And, you know, Bretonia, coming in at 650 now, your foot squires, I actually still think they're a little bit weak. You know, they might need another stat or two. You know, maybe put their bonus versus infantry up to 10, or give them, you know, maybe give them a couple more points of melee defense, bring them to 22. I think that sort of gets them, they just need a little bit more to kind of get them into the right place. You know, you might even be able to give them a little more charge bonus. Like they're starting to get close to where they need to be. You know, a couple more stat points on melee defense, maybe that gets them there, or melee attack. I think, yeah, if I'm playing Bretonia, I'd probably prefer melee attack to melee defense, but you know, that gets them really close. And of course, you know, our Longbeards with great weapons, they just got devalued in this buff by a lot. They were already the weakest, you know, well, they're already one of the weakest. You know, our miners, our dwarf warriors with great weapons, these three units for the dwarfs are so weak. And the testing we've done just shows that in spades. Now, I've seen people use miners and dwarf warriors with great weapons and Longbeards with great weapons in multiplayer and still win, but you know, the testing is clear, and it, you know, people will be better off not using these units in general, just because, and especially now, like these units have just been devalued a lot by the foot squires getting better and the great swords getting better. So in the pantheon of units, armor piercing units with great weapons, they've just got a lot worse. You know, thankfully, you know, we still have the giant slayers. You know, I think these are an absolutely amazing unit, and they've made the Dowie a lot better. But, you know, our Longbeards with great weapons, you know, they are just getting worse by way of other units getting better. So, anyways, hope you found that video interesting. Love to hear your comments down below. You know, love comments. It always spurs on extra testing, and, you know, I like hearing interesting insights, or just like when people say hi. You know, I could say cheers, how's it going? You know, so I'd absolutely love to hear from you in the comments down below. With that said, like I said, hope you found it interesting, and I will see you soon.